Debate instigated by Peter Robinson over desegregating our education system has been heated, characterised by emotive words like apartheid or rabble-rousing. But is it all a flash in the pan, or will it lead to serious consideration of the way forward in education? Mervyn, Storey, you're the DUP chairman of the Education Committee. You're now saying that your party won't rest until you have achieved one school system. How all of a sudden has this become such a cause célèbre?
Well, I think if you look at the current financial situation that we currently are heading into, I don't think anybody could say that we're going to have the comfort of having a huge amount of money spare in relation to administration and delivery of educational services. But I think of what Peter did in his speech was that he commenced a debate. He commenced a debate around a way in which we can move away from having segregation in our educational system. If we're going to have...
It was a strange way to start it all, wasn't it? I mean, all of a sudden, out of the blue comes this talk of benign apartheid, and then you come up saying things like the reaction to it has been backward-looking and predictable. I mean, that's no way to begin a sensible debate about such an important issue, is it?
Well, I don't think if people are paying attention to the discussion that's been ongoing for some time in relation to a shared future, the political institutions, we as politicians have had to move to a situation where we have a shared arrangement in regards to the way in which we're governed. Now, how can we then justify talking about a shared future if one of the key elements of our society segregates our young people, our children, from the age of 4? It wouldn't be acceptable in terms of segregation on the basis of colour. Why should it be acceptable?
It's not that long since Iris Robinson was talking about the self-righteous and pompous claims of reconciliation from the integration lobby, claims parallel to claiming you get 200 people in the back of a Mini.
Well, I think that...
What's changed?
Well, what we have to recognise, it's not about the current integrated system that we have, because the current system that we have was the creation of another sector, which ended up taking resources away and not being able to deal with the problem. So therefore, what we did in terms of when we introduced integrated education as we know it today, we just created another sector and we didn't deal with the core issue. The core issue here surely has to be that at an early age, from the age of 4, some insist that there has to be segregation of children on the basis of their religion.
All right.
That, I don't think, is really something that we can subscribe to.
Jim Clark, you're with the CCMS, the Council for Maintained Schools. Now, Dr. Seamus Quinn, of the Catholic Principles, talked about rabble-rousing. Was that not a completely over-the-top reaction to the beginning of a sensible debate?
Well, everyone can have their reactions, and I think it's important that we recognise that the way in which this debate began, as you said, was not quite the way to make friends and influence people. I think what has been identified, not just in the speech but in subsequent comment, is pretty much an attack on Catholic education. There's been a scorn, if you like, placed upon not just Catholic education in some respects, but also faith-based education generally. So I think if we want to have a sensible debate, and Cardinal Brady...
Well, I'd have to say from what I've read has been fairly value-free. It's been talking about the benefits of bringing people together, not casting scorn on one or making one sound better than another.
Well, I think, as I've said, many things have been said. That is a perspective within the Catholic sector. But
it has to be based on some kind of fact, though, such a perception.
Well, words create perceptions, and I think some of the words have been, in many respects, beyond what would be called words of compromise and collaboration and moving forward. Inclusion is a very important agenda, not just in politics here, but also in education, and particularly from the Catholic perspective. As I was about to say, Cardinal Brady made it very clear, the Catholic sector is up for a conversation which is creative and inclusive, to recognise that we live in a diverse society. But we don't go from 0 to 60 in 4 seconds in this kind of debate. We need to analyse, and I think there's been very little analysis of where we are, and we need to have a strategy to move forward.
But you want to stay at 0. Is that not the argument levelled at you, that you've no interest in desegregation at any time, at any level?
Well, that may be the perspective that some people are putting on this, but that is not the case, and indeed the evidence over the last number of years is very clearly that that's not the case. And I think what Peter Robinson's speech didn't recognise, but there is much good work actually going on the ground between sectors. But we've got to recognise what education is. It is a community-based service. Our communities are segregated. And what are we proposing here? That we bus children from one environment to another simply to satisfy a political agenda?
That's a fair point, Mervyn, Storey. I mean, we live in a segregated society. You can't suddenly make children the carriers of integration.
But I think the point that Jim misses is the fact that the Catholic sector has wanted to stay at naught by and large for a long period of time. On this,
well, he's saying that's not the case, and there's evidence that there's a lot of cooperation going on at many different levels.
Well, let's look at the evidence. Transformation came in as a process whereby schools could transform to be integrated schools. Not one maintained school has transformed during that process.
Yeah, but you don't like integrated schools as we have them today, so that's not really an argument in your favour, is it?
But if you accept the principle, then surely you could deal with the detail. I think that the debate has now commenced, and I think that's the important thing. It is regrettable some of the comments that were made in regards to the...
Do you regret your own backward-looking and predictable complaints?
No, because I wasn't, and Jim knows and CCMS know by their interaction with me over the last 2 years, that this is not about us trying to have a go at Catholic education, but this is about us ensuring that we have an open, transparent debate around how we deal with an issue that has been around for many, many years. And I think having the comfort of staying within your own particular silo and protecting your own particular institutions, while then trying to set the agenda for others to change, is not, I think, the way for us to progress in the future.
On the practical level, I mean, there's talk of being able to save hundreds of millions of pounds by such a move. Do you accept that the way economies are going, that movement might be forced upon you?
We absolutely accept that there's an economies of scale argument here. The Oxford Economics report was really about that. The sharing was one way of meeting that. However, practically, there has to be reorganisation within sectors as a starting point for this. We cannot impose integration of any sort on a community. What we want to develop is the integrating of education by slow steps to recognise that education is one of many services that is impacted by a segregated society. Now, I think the key issue here is how do we move forward? We've had opportunities in terms of moving forward through ESA, which has had political reaction to it. We're not
the Education and Skills Authority, which looks to be stranded at the moment.
That would have had one step, if you like, in terms of rationalising provision at an administrative level. We have policies like, for instance, the Sustainable Schools Policy, but we haven't had those things implemented because we do need an invest to save strategy to move these issues forward.
But it must also be about principle, you would both agree. And I wonder, Jim Clark, I mean, if you were starting to organise an education system in Northern Ireland now, would you have a segregated system?
If you look at education systems throughout the world, there are groupings which exist in all societies. If you were starting from
today in Northern Ireland, would you have
it? And the aspiration to have an inclusive society is one that we share. But we have to recognise what we have here and where we are. We have a diverse society. There are different perspectives within that society, not just confined to education. But let's look at the real priorities here for education. And the real priorities are that we underperform relative to our international competitors. We have the widest gap between provision, between outcome for children from socially developed backgrounds and those from disadvantaged backgrounds. And in terms of access, you can access a Catholic school, a controlled school, an Irish medium, an integrated. You can't access a grammar school. Or you can't access perhaps a single-sex school.
So let's try and focus on this argument. No, take your points.
I think integration in the broadest sense needs to be looked at. Right. And in truth, the biggest impediment in Northern Ireland is the social differentiation that exists, as well as the religious.
Where, Mervyn, Storey, do we take this from here?
Well, I think that we have to have the continuation of the debate. I don't think that we can have a partial approach to the issue of a shared future. While it may be convenient for institutions to try and protect their interests, I think that if we have children as the centre of all of what we say we're about in relation to education, then I think if we want to give to our children the best possible opportunity, the best possible chance of having the best possible education, then I think we need to be inventive and we need to look at ways whereby we don't protect institutions, but we keep education and children at the centre.
I'm sure we both agree that children are at the centre of it all. Thank you, gentlemen, very much indeed.
Thank you.